You're watching the Cablevision channel. Stay tuned for 4 hours of original programming. At 7, it's Stories to Grow On, followed by Songbook, Cooking Adventures with Mary, Along the Blackstone, Blues Fest, and Final Edition. But first, it's Stories to Grow On.
Welcome to Stories to Grow On. In the next half hour, we hope parents and children enjoy one of life's simple pleasures, reading together. Throughout this series, we will read excerpts from a variety of books. It is our hope that parents and children will finish reading these books together. Many of these books are available at your local library and bookstores.
Stories to grow on as we grow up each day. We can share with others what we learned today. Stories to grow on.
Today's feature story is The Bad Times of Irma Baumling, written by Carol Brink, illustrated by Trina Hyman. Our reader is Pamela Irwin. Mrs. Irwin works for the town of Danvers in the Water and Electric Division. So everyone, let's settle in and get ready to laugh as the new girl in school tells a lie to impress her classmates. A lie that steamrolls out of control.
I think you're going to like this book. We'll get started right away with Chapter 1, Judy's House. Irma Baumling told a lie. It was the first bad thing Irma had ever done, and all of the terrible things she did later grew out of that lie, like poisonous mushrooms out of a rotten log. Irma was walking home from school one autumn day with a bunch of books under her arm. She read a great deal, and she liked to go to the library and take out books to keep her occupied in the long evenings in the big old-fashioned house where she lived. She was walking alone because she did not know many children in the new school she attended. They already knew each other, and they were not much interested in Irma. As for Irma herself, she couldn't care less if they wouldn't speak to her or be friends. She was sure that she would not like any of them anyway. But just then, Judy Miller caught up with Irma. "Hi," she said. "Well, hi," said Irma, surprised out of her gloomy thoughts. "Can I walk along?" "You may," said Irma, looking over the tops of her glasses. "What's your name?" asked Judy. "It's Irma Baumling." "My gracious," said Judy. "Are you Baumling's department store?" "Well, it's my great-uncle's store," said Irma. "My father has come to help manage it." She thought later, after she had told her lie, that she might just as well have told Judy that her father owned the store. That's how one lie makes another easier. "What's your name?" asked Irma. "My name is Judy Miller, and I have 4 brothers, 2 sisters, one's just a teeny baby, and I have a little dog that shakes hands and rolls over and jumps over sticks. And I have lots of hamsters. What do you have?" Irma thought hard and fast. What did she have? No brothers and sisters, no little dog, no hamsters. Her mother was spending a month at the health spa, probably having her face lifted. Her father was very, very busy trying to make things go better at Great-Uncle's store. Great-Uncle Arnold was home with the gout. Great-Aunt Julia was deaf. And the live-in couple, who were the maid and the butler, frightened Irma half to death. She took so long to answer that Judy said, "Don't you have anything?" Then Irma said, and she was as surprised to hear herself say this, "Yes, I have the biggest doll in the world. She's as tall as I am. She's big enough to wear my dresses." "Really?" "Certainly." "Where do you keep her?" "I keep her in the closet across from my bed." "Gee, could I see her sometime?" "My mother doesn't like for me to take her out," said Irma. "She's very breakable." "I'd be awfully careful." "Well, maybe sometime when I know you better, Judy." My, how exciting to have a doll as big as that, said Judy. Can she walk? Yes, if I hold her hand, said Irma. What color is her hair? Is it black like yours? Irma pulled at one of her black pigtails tied with red yarn. No, said Irma. Her hair is the color of ripe oranges, and her eyes are cerulean blue. Sir, what? What kind of blue is that? It's the blue of the sky, said Irma, pursing her lips and thinking about how many big words she knew. Listen, Irma, Judy said, why don't you stop at my house on your way home? You do live in that great big Baumline house on top of the hill, don't you? Yes, said Irma. It's really my great-uncle Arnold's house, but as soon as we're settled, we'll probably get something much, much nicer. Gee, said Judy, how could anything be nicer than the great big Baumline house? Do many of you live in a big house? How many of you live in a great big house? Yeah, that's nice, huh?
He lives in.
Oh, okay. Irma thought of the small, pleasant apartment where she and her mother and father had lived so happily in New York before they came to Tinkersville to manage Uncle Arnold's store. But somehow she felt she could not tell Judy about that. The New York apartment was something familiar and kind, but now lost and gone forever. Oh, there are nicer places, Irma said. Like what? Said Judy eagerly. Oh, perhaps a chateau. Anybody here know what a chateau is? All right, well, listen. What is that? Said Judy. A sort of palace, I suppose, Irma said, with chandeliers and drawing rooms and a little green gazebo out in the garden. Judy looked at Irma admiringly, all those big words that Irma knew, and what a wonderful house they conjured up in Judy's mind. Well, said Judy, you won't think much of my house, but I'd like you to stop by anyway. You can see my little dog and our baby if she's awake from her nap. Judy's house was right on the way from school up the hill to the big Baumline house. Unless she went through the park, Irma had passed it every day on her way to school, but she hadn't particularly noticed it. It was a small, gray house like any other house on the block, only perhaps a little more cluttered. There was a baby carriage on the front porch and a small doghouse near the front door. There were tools and old wooden boxes and pieces of wire screening lying around. Two boys were at work building something with the tools and boxes and wire screening. What do you suppose they were building? Let's listen and see what they're building. That's Matthew and Mark, said Judy. They're building a runway for the hamsters. Do you like hamsters? I don't know, said Irma. I never saw one. Anybody here have hamsters? Yeah, we have hamsters. Well, I'll show you, said Judy. They're something like mice, only cuter without tails. If you have 2 or 3 of them, you soon have others. And then you have to build an extra runway, so they'll be happy. I see, said Irma. She looked over the tops of her glasses at Matthew and Mark, but they were too busy to pay attention to a couple of girls. Irma once learned a rhyme that said, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you saddle a rat and I'll jump on. It was a way you remembered the first books of the New Testament. Now she asked Judy, so where are Luke and John? They're probably out back playing croquet, Judy said. But how did you know their names? Oh, I guessed, said Irma. Be real quiet now, and you can look at the baby. The 2 girls tiptoed onto the porch and peered under the hood of an old-fashioned baby carriage. In a nest of blankets, Irma saw a small, round head trimmed with a soft yellow fuzz of hair, eyes closed, and pink little cheeks. A small pink hand clutched at a blanket. She's nice, isn't she, said Judy. Oh, yes, she's very nice, said Irma. In the house, a lady was taking a pan of cookies out of the oven. Mama, this is Irma Baumline. Her great uncle owns Baumline's store. And do you know what? Irma has the biggest doll in the world. It's as big as she is, and it can wear her dresses. My, said Mrs. Miller. How are you, Irma? Pretty well, thank you, said Irma shyly. Well, you may each have a cookie, but no more than one. These are for PTA. Is your mama going to PTA, Irma? Oh, I don't think so, said Irma. I expect she'll be going to the theater or a ball or something. Oh, yes, of course, said Mrs. Miller. Mama, Irma's doll has hair the color of ripe oranges. And you tell her, Irma, about the eyes. Cerulean, Irma said in a small voice. It means sky blue, said Judy. Oh, my, said Mrs. Miller. In the backyard, the two boys were trying to play croquet with a very old croquet set. The balls had lost much of their colored stripes from being banged around so much. A small girl named Patty kept running after the balls and trying to pick them up. Everyone knows that croquet balls mustn't be picked up in the middle of the game. Do you know why? Do you know anybody know how to play croquet? Well, how come you can't pick up the balls? Because they're getting closer to the archway that they're supposed to go under. Kind of like when you play miniature golf, too. You can't move the golf balls either. A little dog, who knew better than to chase croquet balls, was sitting by looking very interested. But when he saw Judy, he left the game and came running. His tail wagged, his tongue loud out of his mouth as if he were laughing. Oh, this is my dog, Orbit, said Judy. I call him that because he goes round and round after his tail, and Daddy says he's in orbit. Do you know what an orbit is? Certainly, said Irma. Would you like to see him do tricks, said Judy. Yes, I would. Why, it was perfectly true what Judy had said. Orbit could shake hands and roll over. Then Judy held up a stick, and Orbit jumped over it in one direction and then back again in another. Now he's going to say his prayers, said Judy. She pulled up an empty box and told Orbit to sit up beside it. Now say your prayers, she commanded. Orbit put his nose down on the box and covered his eyes with his paws. Stay, said Judy. Orbit stayed very still for almost a minute until Judy said, Amen. Then he jumped up, barking with delight, and began chasing his tail. Irma didn't often allow herself to show how interested she could be, but now she forgot about looking slightly bored. She cried, oh, he's dear, he's so cute. Oh, he's just darling. The little dog stopped chasing his tail and came up to Irma to be patted on the head. Oh, I wish I had a dog like this, said Irma. But you've got your doll, said Judy. I wish I had a doll like yours. Only, I don't know where I'd keep it. Our house is too small. Then they went and looked at the hamsters in the cage near the back fence. The hamsters were darling, too. Judy took one out and let Irma hold it. It was soft and funny. It twitched its nose and ran up Irma's arms. She had to hold it in both hands to keep it from getting away. Would you like to keep it, Irma? Judy said. We have more than we need. Oh, yes, said Irma. How would I keep it? What would I feed it? What do you feed hamsters? Anybody know what you feed hamsters? Hamster food, sure. Maybe something else. Let's see what we read. Well, you do have a cage of some kind, don't you, said Judy. There's an old bird cage in the attic, Irma said. I saw it when Mr. Dillingham put our bags away. Oh, I think a bird cage would do just fine. And hamsters like seeds and crumbs and other things that birds and mice eat. You might even give them a little bit of peanut butter sandwich. You can do this until you can get to the store tomorrow and buy some hamster food. Well, thank you very, very much, said Irma. You've certainly been nice to me, Judy. That's all right, said Judy. Someday I'll come to your house and you can show me your doll. We'll be right back with Chapter 2.
Want to taste of something make you feel good?
Leave me alone.
Look, crack won't hurt you.
I said no, man.
Good job, son. That's just what you do if that ever happens.
Okay, Dad.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. My favorite book is Arthur's Halloween. I'm Nick, and my favorite book is NASCAR Racers.
My name is Taylor. My favorite book is Benjamin Franklin, Young Printer.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and my favorite book is Just As Long As We're Together.
Chapter 2, Irma's house. What do you think Irma's house is going to look like? Got any ideas? if her grandfather owns a huge department store and she lives in a big house, Irma had quite a time getting the hamster home. First, she had to put him in her pocket, but he kept sticking his head out, threatening to run away. And she had all of her library books to carry. Finally, Irma set her books down and made a little straitjacket around the hamster with her scarf so she could hold on to him firmly. Then she picked up her books and ran the rest of the way up the hill to Uncle Arnold's house. There were stone steps the last part of the way up, and Irma was totally out of breath when she reached the front door. It would have been nice if she could have opened it herself and scurried privately up to her room. But the big front door was always kept locked, and Irma didn't have a key. She had to ring the old-fashioned doorbell, and Mr. Dillingham, the butler part of the live-in couple, would come and let her in. This had always seemed unnecessary to Irma, but today it was a downright nuisance. Here she was, all out of breath, with a pile of library books, a struggling hamster, and she had to wait. And to make matters worse, she had a strong feeling she better not let Mr. Dillingham see that hamster. He was most certainly to disapprove. 30 years ago, the Dillinghams had come from England to take care of the Bromley mansion, and now they were as much a part of it as the older Bromleys were. As a matter of fact, they were more a part of it than Irma and her father. They had only been there for 6 weeks. The doorbell echoed through the big house, and Irma had to pull on it 3 or 4 times before anyone came. This old house had been built by Irma's great-grandfather in 1898. 1898, that's a long time ago, isn't it? That was when Bromley's store was the only department store in town. In fact, 1898 was carved in the heavy stone in the front gable. The portico, where Irma stood, was loaded down with curlicues and filigrees of carved wood. These were doubtless intended to make the house look gayer and lighter, but so far Irma was concerned they only heightened the gloom. When Irma stood in front of the big door, pulling the bell, she felt as if the whole weight of stone that was hanging over her was about to drop. She was sure in another moment she and the hamster would be crushed by the 1898 stones coming down on them. Fortunately, before this happened, there was a sound of footsteps coming along the hall inside the house, and Mr. Dillingham opened the door. "Good afternoon, Miss Irma," he said. "I trust school went well." "Oh, fine," Irma said, "thank you very much." And she rushed by him up the stairs to her room. Irma's room had belonged to several generations of Bromley daughters, and each of them somehow left their mark on it. The old-fashioned dressing table with a chintz skirt had belonged to Gretchen. The plate glass mirror on the outside of the closet door had belonged to Emily, and the modernistic mobile hanging from the high ceiling had been left by Yvonne. As yet, Irma had not left her mark. Perhaps it will be the hamster cage, Irma thought. She put her books down on the bed, and still holding the hamster tightly in her scarf, she panted up the final staircase to the attic. The attic was large and dusty, and crowded with shrouded furniture and old trunks and unguessed treasures. Did you ever have a chance to go in somebody's old attic and find something great? Did you find something great? What did you find? What did you find? Yeah? Oh, well, think about it. Maybe you'll remember soon. Up there she found a cobweb chest of drawers, and on top of that was an empty bird cage. Irma grabbed it and ran back to her room. She even had a little bathroom off of her bedroom, and so taking precaution and putting the plug in the drain, she released the hamster in the bathtub, took off his straitjacket, and he raced around gaily for a while. The sides of the tub were too slippery and too steep for him to get out. Irma felt safe in turning her attention to the birdcage. It was rusty and dirty, but in no time at all, Irma had it shining and clean. She put several thicknesses of newspaper on the bottom of the cage, and then she fastened the top part of the cage back onto the bottom and tried the little door that opened. It opened more easily than Irma liked, but she still felt sure that the hamster would not be able to get out of there. She put water in one of the little cups, and she promised herself to get seeds and peanuts for the other cup. Then she caught the hamster and put him into the cage through the little door. He raced around and around. "He's in orbit," Irma said happily. "Maybe I'll call him Orbit 2. Who remembers? Who's Orbit 1? Remember who was Orbit 1? The dog. Whose dog? Judy's dog, yep. She had not felt so happy since she had come to Tinkersville. She was even bold enough to go down and beard Mrs. Dillingham in her den. Mr. and Mrs. Dillingham were having a spot of tea in the butler's pantry before they began to prepare supper. "Please, may I have a peanut butter sandwich?" asked Irma, looking over her glasses. "You'll spoil your dinner," said Mrs. Dillingham disapprovingly. "Oh, I promise I'll clean my plate," said Irma. "She promises to clean her plate," said Mr. Dillingham. "Very well," said Mrs. Dillingham, "but I don't know what we're coming to nowadays when children are allowed to eat at all hours." "I can make the sandwich myself," suggested Irma. "Indeed not," said Mrs. Dillingham. "I am sure I haven't kept this kitchen spotless for 30 years, only to let children make a mess in it now. I'll make you a peanut butter sandwich myself and hope that you won't get crumbs around upstairs." "Oh, no," said Irma. As soon as she had the peanut butter sandwich, Irma raced upstairs with it. Orbit 2 had been shredding some newspapers in the bottom of the cage and making a nest. Irma opened the little door and put the whole peanut butter sandwich in the cage. At first, the hamster seemed alarmed, then interested. Then he came out of the nest, broke off a dainty little portion of the sandwich. To Irma's delight, he sat up on his hind legs, holding it in his paws to nibble at it. His tummy was white, and his paws were just like tiny pink hands. His teeth were sharp, and his jaws worked very fast. His cheeks kept getting fatter and fatter, and Irma realized he was storing the food in his cheeks until he felt like swallowing it later on. Irma was so interested in watching the hamster, she almost forgot to get washed and cleaned up for dinner. When dinner was ready, Mr. Dillingham struck a big gong in the front hall. It sounded like a sonic boom all over the house, and although Irma had been here for 6 weeks, she still jumped when she heard the gong. When Irma came down the stairs in the big front hall, her father was helping Uncle Arnold walk into the dining room. "Hi, Irma," said her father. "Hi, Daddy," Irma cried gaily, more gaily than she had done in weeks. Her father leaned down and kissed the top of her head, and Irma would have thrown her arms around his neck, but Great Uncle Arnold said, "Oh, take care, nephew. I nearly lost my balance then. You have to hold my arm and walk more steadily." "Well, how did school go today?" Irma asked her father. "Oh, fine," Irma said. She wanted to go on and tell him all about the hamster, but there was Mr. Dillingham standing in the doorway and looking disapproving. There never seemed to be a moment when Irma and her father could be alone together. Great Aunt Julia was already in the dining room, fussing with the flowers. At the end of the steamed pudding with custard sauce, Irma looked over her glasses and said, "I'd like to be excused and go to my room, please." "Well, do you have something to read?" said her father. "Oh, yes, a pile of books," said Irma. "Shall I send up Mrs. Dillingham to open your bed?" asked Aunt Julia. "Oh, no," cried Irma, with more than usual loudness. "Oh, thank you just the same, Aunt Julia." Her father kissed her. "Be good, daughter," he said. Irma knew that he would probably go back to the store, and he would be busy in his room with lots of figures. Uncle Arnold's store needed so much attention to bring it up to date. The hamster was asleep when Irma got there, but he poked his nose out and looked at her with his beady eyes. She took him out of the cage and let him run around the bed and had a good time playing with him. It was only after she put him back in his cage and undressed herself for bed that another thought occurred to her. The dim lamp by her bed was the only light, and as she walked toward the closet to put away her clothes, Irma caught sight of herself in her long white nightgown in the mirror on the closet door. For a terrible instant, she saw it. The life-size doll, standing in the closet, the biggest doll in the world. In the instant before she recognized herself reflected in the mirror, Irma had a strong feeling of remorse. Her father had said, "Be good," and what had she done but tell an awful lie? She opened the closet door, and there on the floor in a far corner sat a very small doll with her face to the wall. It was the only doll Irma had. And that was because she really didn't like dolls very much anyway. And now, Judy Miller, who had been so kind to her, would want to see her life-size doll. What was she going to do? Irma could think of only one comforting possibility. Perhaps Judy would forget.
Hi, my name is Brittany. My favorite book is Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Hi, my name is Maxwell. My favorite book is Charlotte's Web.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. My favorite book is The Bernstein Bears.
Hi and welcome back. Today we're reading The Bad Times of Irma Bomling, and we just finished chapter 2, talking about will Judy forget? How many of you think Judy's going to forget? Nobody? I don't think so either. Why do you think that Irma lied? Why did she lie to Judy? Sarah? She wanted to be better, maybe.
Because she didn't have a lot of things like Judy.
Now, Judy, what did Judy have? She had so many things. You remember how many things she had?
She had about like 6.
And what did she have?
She had like 3 hamsters, so she gave one to Irma.
Yeah. And she did. Wasn't that nice? She gave one to Irma. Would you like Judy to be your friend?
Yes. Yes.
And she had lots of brothers and sisters. Yeah?
She had 4 brothers, 2 sisters, a dog, and a lot of hamsters.
They had a pretty active house, I'd say, huh? Would you like to visit her house?
Yes.
Would you like to visit Irma's house?
No. Maybe.
Why? Yeah?
Because she doesn't have a lot of stuff.
Doesn't have too much stuff. No brothers and sisters.
There's Snoopy Butler.
I'm sorry?
The Snoopy Butler.
Snoopy Butler, yeah. And you have to speak loud so we can hear you, okay? Yes?
She lies sometimes.
Irma lies. Why do you suppose she's lying? Do you think she's looking for attention? Louder.
Maybe because she likes all the stuff that she has, and she doesn't think she has enough stuff.
She doesn't think she has enough stuff. Well, she probably has some stuff, but not the stuff that kids like. Do you think her plan is working?
No.
Why?
Because she keeps lying.
Because she's going to keep lying. Remember the very beginning we talked about one lie leads to another lie, leads to another lie. Why is lying wrong?
You get in trouble.
You're getting a lot of trouble. How come?
Because
Yeah.
you're not telling the truth.
You're not telling the truth. What happens in your house if you tell a lie? Yeah.
Well, 2 things. Well, actually 3 things. If it's, well, first we get grounded, and then if it's like really bad, we get Tabasco sauce.
Yeah.
I get sent to my room.
Get sent to your room, yeah.
I get punished like the rest of the day.
You get punished. It's not nice to lie. Because we're going to see, when you read the rest of Irma Bomling, you're going to see how when you tell 1 lie, you tell 2, tell 3. All right? We're going to wrap up now, and hopefully you're going to go to the library and get The Bad Times of Irma Bomling and finish reading it to see what happens, okay? Thanks so much for being with me today. Have a great rest of your day.